So good afternoon, everybody. It's 1:30 on a typically grey afternoon here in Brussels. I know this is probably a busy time for all of you, so I really appreciate that you're taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. I'm Paul Walsh with the EBAA. This is a webinar set up by the EBAA's lawyers and Financiers committee. And so what we're going to have today is just a brief introduction to both of those committees, or at least one of those committees. And then we'll be getting right into the main topic of today, which is the European AOC, and that's going to be dealt with by David van den Langenbergh, who has spearheaded this project. And we'll finish off with an overview of 2020, one of the most unusual years in the history of business aviation, how the crisis has impacted the sector and what we can expect for the future. That's coming from Arthur Thomas, EBAA's Market Intelligence Manager. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with Julia Maury and Frederick Jost. These are the two co-chairs of our AMAC Lawyers Committee. Julia and Frederick, how are you doing? I was just wondering, Julia, if you could maybe give me an overview of the Lawyers Committee, why you think it's important, and some of the things that you've achieved together in the past.
Yes, thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to see already some of the members of our committee in the chat. So it's good to see that they participate to the events. So for those of you who do not know our committee, a few years ago, we created a committee of lawyers involved in aviation, and in particular in business aviation. In fact, this is a very specific area of law, and not many lawyers are familiar with it. And so we think that our network is extremely rich and allows us to exchange know-how, but also to know which lawyers practice business aviation in which jurisdiction. Through the years, we've had many different projects. I mentioned only one, which I think is the most important. A couple of years ago, we published a booklet divided by jurisdiction, where we explained what business aviation is in different systems, legal systems. And we think that this is a quite unique publication that offers not only to lawyers, but also to operators a good source of information, a first port of call. I maybe leave to Fred if you want to add anything. We co-chair the group. We've been co-chairing it for a long time. So you hear me speaking, but it is as if we were both speaking. So Fred, if you want to add anything.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. We are very happy to welcome you. Thanks to Paul to organize it. And thanks, of course, to David to be one of our star speaker today. I will not add much. Yes, you said it all, Julia, as usual. And we are always, if there are lawyers who are not yet a member of our committee, please join us. So we are not only, one of the projects was a booklet, but also we are initiating a webinar like this one today. Actually, as a follow-up of a previous webinar, which has, when it happened in September, the With Thinking Business Aviation, when our attention was drawn to David, who spoke about the topic of today. But maybe I leave the floor now. I see that Marie-Laure has joined us because it's actually it's a co-initiative with the Financiers committee. So maybe I leave her some minutes to talk, or maybe it was your role, Paul, to distribute the.
Hi, thanks very much, Frederick. Thanks, Julia. Hi, Marie-Laure. I want to see now if we can get you on to speak as well. Marie-Laure Gassier is the chair of our Financiers committee. And just so you know, these committees form part of a group of committees. We have 8 of them. It's called AMAC. We're catering for all elements of, let's say, the suppliers to business aviation operators. So there's lots of opportunities for people to get involved. Marie-Laure, how are you doing? I was just wondering a little bit about the Financiers Committee. What's the purpose of this committee, and what are some of the things that you've achieved recently?
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar. Thank you also, Julia and Frederick, for the brief introduction. Just to be short, to keep it short, the Financiers Committee is one of the committees that are associated to EBAA. So we are associated members, and this committee gathers a number of banks and financing institutions that are involved in and interested in financing business aviation. Amongst various initiatives that we had a few months ago, it was a joint initiative together with the Lawyers Committee to suggest some action that could help and foster the harmonization of a register of business aviation in Europe. So we thought that harmonizing mortgage registers and aircraft register in Europe at the European level would be a big plus for the industry, and it would help a lot to smooth the transaction, and including on the financing side. So when we noticed that Luxaviation took this initiative to seek a European AOC, we thought it was perfectly in line with this project, and we wanted to give some visibility and to better understand what had been done. So maybe Paul, I can leave you to explain a little bit this initiative, and we will be very happy to listen and possibly after that to take this project forward for the benefit of all the industry.
Yeah, very good. So just one last question I have, I think maybe just for Julia. Obviously, you know, in the past, this whole initiative, the Lawyers Committee, the Financiers Committees, there was a big networking element, people meeting together, events in Brussels, events in different parts of Europe. What type of things are you doing, or do you plan to do to try and keep the community together? Because I'm assuming that we're not going to be able to, unfortunately, see each other face to face, at least for another couple of months.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think you mentioned an issue which is a real one, and 2020 has been a very difficult year for everybody, and we're now moving to a digital world, a digital connection with everybody. But what we've noticed is that although the contacts are by Skype or Teams or Zooms, the human element, the human factor remains extremely important. So we have started organizing meetings via Teams with the members of our network, for group. We have other projects that we will discuss at the end of the month with our group as well. However, we invite all the members of the group to be in touch, not only with us, but amongst themselves, to exchange ideas, projects, information, because this is the only way of making a network be alive in these very difficult times where human contact, unfortunately, is extremely limited.
Okay, excellent. But I think there's still lots of opportunities to get involved. So that's a call to all the people online here today. If you want to get involved, we need your input. We welcome it. You can contact me, contact Julia, Frederick, or Mary-Laura. Lots of opportunities there. Thanks very much. So I think that with that, we can move to the first topic of today. I'm very happy to welcome David van den Langenbergh. What I would like to say just before we get right into that is that let's keep this as open and as lively as possible. I think David is well capable of answering many questions on this topic. So there's a question and answer function. Please put your questions in there. If you want to actually speak, that's very welcome as well. So I think we can try and get you online to speak as well. David, how are you doing? Very well, thank you, Paul. Thanks very much. Second time that we're meeting in an online forum like this. I was wondering if you could maybe just start from the beginning. How did this project come about, and what were the first steps in trying to develop this?
Let me first of all allow me to thank you, Julia, Frederick, Marie-Laure, for having me as a speaker on this webinar. And indeed, I'll go back a couple of years. Back in 2017, I had the privilege of being invited and involved with discussions with the Brussels Parliament, one of the members there, and simply the idea that some of the associations raised about this new exciting initiative that the European Commission wanted to roll out. So basically, we were at the birth of this discussion in Brussels, which was a unique opportunity. And first of all, it's a big and a nice example why it's important for everyone on the call and the whole industry to be part of an association like this or others. I think it's really worth the effort. When we started discussing this and thinking about whether our company should engage in this and spend budget on developing it further in a cooperation with EASA, I must say all of this started mainly out of frustration, not in a too negative way, but it's simply the nature of how our company has grown in the last 10 years, starting with one little AOC in headquarters in Luxembourg. And then by acquisition, they grown as a big international organization. At the end, we had like 14 AOCs and we had to deal with 11 national authorities. If I focus on Europe, and I must say that was mainly the cause of frustration, because we all know there might be one rule book and guidance how to run an AOC or how to run the company and the processes, but just dealing with all the different national authorities, and even in one country dealing with different inspectors depending on the nature of your company, it gave so much diversity and different opinions and things we had to do differently, that it was a constant struggle for us to be able to harmonize our company with one big management system. That was nearly impossible, because every time we ended up having a veto or a different opinion on the local authority level. So when Moses cannot go to the mountain, you have to bring the mountain to Moses, I guess. And for us, it was a good way of looking into this and creating one single management system that would allow us to run our company as one organization. And that's the exciting part about the basic regulation that was adopted in 2018. For those that are really interested in reading all of that, it's Basic Regulation 2018-1139, specifically Article 65. So what options do we have? You can either be like a group of organizations in different member states acting jointly, like airline groups, for instance, or in our case, a group of AOCs belonging to one holding. Or another option would be that you have an established organization in one member state, but you have line stations, facilities, satellite stations in other member states. You need to know, and I start by saying that because there was a lot of objection from the national authorities when they heard about this option and basic regulations, and a lot of pushback, of course. But the reference point and the reference guidance where you can actually go to, because that's what EASA had in mind, is what they are doing on the aircraft production level. I mean, we all know that a type certificate, production certificate, is regulated by EASA directly, and is also delegated to them, and that never causes us a question or an issue, and we don't have a problem with that. And that's the nice thing about this as well, because using the basic regulation Article 65, in our case we choose option number 2. We worked closely together with EASA and with one national authority to start as a kickoff to convert one AOC and transfer the oversight of that local AOC from the local authority to EASA directly, and we obtained our approval in October last year. By having that EASA AOC, then we can move forward and start transferring aircraft that are on other AOCs to that EASA AOC. But with the big advantage is that each aircraft that is operated in another country they can keep their local tail number. So you don't have to do a registration change. Practically, it's actually an operator change that you do internally in your organization. It's a very wise thing to do that in close cooperation, of course, with the national authorities. But what I can share with you, it was very exciting to work closely together with the EASA, because they have been very helpful in leading those discussions and ironing out the wrinkles and engage with the local authority to really make sure everyone is on the same page. Now, one might think, what about my local good understanding with national authorities? That is something that we have been thinking about as well, of course, because we do know and we cherish the good understanding we have with our local authorities everywhere. And I'm very happy to hear that also in our organization, our local subject matter experts have very good understanding with the local authorities. But again, it's not about breaking a good understanding or a good relationship. It's just making sure that we have one management system, one safety management system, one operational management system, and that we can finally end up in having one organization tailored to business aviation. The last thing that I said here on business aviation is really important, because I must honestly say, before, when we had to deal with all those national authorities, or till today, honestly, in my opinion, there is a lack of understanding of what business aviation is about, compared to maybe an authority on the other side of the ocean, where they have tailored rules for specifically our kind of business aviation. I do feel that it's still missing. I mean, we're getting there slowly but surely, but it is something that is really needed, a good understanding by EASA of what business aviation is all about. And it shows in the process. And I can share with you, of course, partnering with EASA to have an EASA AOC comes with obligations. They will not lower the bar. In contrary, the rules are very clear. There is room for discussion and understanding both ways of what we are doing. But of course, they will never allow a precedent that corners are cut or you can go into like a grayish area of interpretation of the rules. Now, we as Luxaviation, we really do not see that as a negative. It's even very, very well. I mean, we like to be proud about the product. We like to push and strive for the best possible and the safest possible environment for our aircraft in view of our staff, in view of how we operate, in view of the asset value and the customer, of course. And I can, with my technical background, I like to go back to a very technical thing. An aircraft needs to be built perfectly and flawless. And we all know that if there is something that needs to be fixed, it can be a hiccup, it can be costly. If you have an airworthiness directive that is issued, you have to ground the airplane, etc. And that's exactly the same with an organization. So if you can roll out a way of working that really meets as much as possible what the rule maker, EASA directly in this case, what they define, then you have much less corrections afterwards to do, or much less discussions during audits with authorities or with EASA, because they have oversight on that. And I think that is a real plus for us. It takes, of course, more effort and discipline and to get to that point, but as soon as you are there, you are very well sure that you have a very compliant and safe environment for the operation. So for us, it's been a good exercise. We're not finished yet. We started now the transfer of the AOCs with a very solid management of change program that needs a lot of our attention. But the end result is there. I mean, actually, we have our approval, and we will only grow from here.
Based on the fact that this is actually working now and you're moving in this direction, do you see that the market going in this way as well? Namely, that we'll get to a stage where it won't really make sense to have two AOCs or multiple AOCs in different European countries, that that the European AOC will be the way that the industry goes?
I think the way forward for European business aviation is most of all that, to me, this allows EASA a direct insight on our business, and specifically our business. We are the second organization that is doing this. We are the first business jet operator due to COVID-19, and somebody jumped the line last year, but which was an airline, Wizz Air. But for us, I see and I experience and I can observe that it's very good for EASA now to be directly involved, hands-on, and to see what business aviation is about. Because I must say, like I said before, there used to be a big misunderstanding and misperception of what we are doing. A lot of people in the authority, they come from their own certain backgrounds, and of course, bigger companies, bigger airlines, they feed the industry well because just by their volume and size. But we all know that an airline is not a business jet AOC.
Great. Listen, we have questions coming in already. One from Fabian. Does EASA manage the oversight activities, the approval, the audits directly of your AOC, or does it remain under a single national authority?
At this stage, they are doing everything on their own, so it's directly by EASA. What EASA does, they do engage with working arrangement with local authorities, so that there is an exchange of workforce. But when a local authority inspector will do the survey, the audit, they work in behalf of EASA. So from that point of view, you can actually say that EASA has oversight and control on that.
Okay, very good. Next question from Matthew. David, can you select any registry in the EU to register aircraft under your single AOC, or should your fleet aircraft be registered in a jurisdiction where you have a local operation?
Technically, today it's option 2, so we are transferring aircraft registered in the place where we have an office, but in any case, it allows us to register any aircraft from any EASA member state on that AOC. But
okay,
the full answer to that question is something that I don't know yet, but I most likely think will be is that we might need a local representative in that country, because of course we will have to register that country, that aircraft for that specific country, and you need local presence to do that.
Okay, David, lots of questions coming in now, so I think to a certain extent that you might feel like you're on the firing line, so I hope it don't come across as being too rude. One fun question: out of the 14 AOCs that you work with, which registry, which national authority understood business aviation the best?
That's indeed a fun question. That depends.
Bear in mind, this is a closed group, just members, not external stakeholders.
I can take the hits. No worries, Paul. This is a web-based thing, so please do shoot, and I'm not going to feel anything. You know, it depends. It depends. Actually, it goes down to the inspector level. You can have an authority that might have a very strict, severe, or harsh reputation on certain topics, but you might end up with one of their inspectors that is very forthcoming and understanding on depending on what topic. I know we operate in countries where the part M or the camo or the awareness guys are very, very demanding, but the ops guys are relaxed, and you have other countries where it's the opposite. For political reasons, I'm not going to say further than that.
Yeah, we're looking for a country. We're looking for name the country, but I guess a lot of people have their own ideas and opinions on that. David, are you already using
let me give you a hint.
Okay.
Our first
Give me a hint.
Our first AOC that we transferred from local authority to EASA oversight was out of Portugal.
Okay. Very clear, David. So are you using the European AOC for Part 145 approval? Line stations in multiple countries?
Initially, that was the idea, but then in the course of the last years, it was for us a business decision to sell our MRO facilities worldwide. I must share with you is that I strongly do have the impression that the initial idea of EASA and the European Commission or DG Move, when they were thinking about this, was actually more in the direction of Part 145, because it makes a lot of sense to do it as a 145 organization, actually.
Okay, okay. But not a project on Part 145 at the moment?
No, not to my knowledge. Maybe on the big roads, on the commercial air transport, but not that I know of.
Okay. Question from Mike Ryan. Hi, Mike. What happens post-Brexit to the G-Reg aircraft? Will they be on the EU AOC?
No, sadly not. That was, of course, our initial idea to mitigate the Brexit situation and move the aircraft to an EASA AOC. But by the nature of what happened with Brexit, that wouldn't work anyhow. They're no longer part of the EASA system. And that would have resulted in doing a registry change, which is not the goal of our UK-based fleet. Okay,
so just let's say another one of the many complications thrown up by Brexit. It sounds like this is something that you would recommend. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I do. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I have high esteem and respect for national authorities. And if you are an operator in one nation, and you have a good understanding, there is no need to go directly EASA. But as soon as you have a multinational or a multi-country operation, and you start running into issues that one authority would like to see sidebar changes on your MEL revision, and the other ones want to see the ink in red for the same thing, it goes down to that silliness. Then it might be worth start to think about doesn't it make more sense to go with one oversight, one regulator, and go from there.
Okay. Another interesting question. If you're starting from scratch, you don't have an AOC, do you have to get the national AOC first, or can you go directly for a European AOC?
I do believe that option is possible, but I must also say that we are still a pilot project, and I think EASA, I mean, what I'm saying is we are learning a lot of the practicalities around this new basic regulation still today. And that is an answer that needs to be given by EASA alone, whether they would accept that, yes or no. But I do not recall to see any objection to do that in the basic regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's say you only have one AOC. Are there advantages to getting the European AOC? That's from Simon Shin.
I'm sorry, Paul, if we have already one AOC?
If there's a company that just has one AOC, so it's not consolidating multiple AOCs together, it just has one. Are there already advantages for them to move to a European AOC with that one AOC?
That's hard to put a number on, because at the end, the advantages have to be translated in cash. And I do not see that happening for one AOC in one country.
Yeah. Okay. Wanted maybe Julia and Frederick from a legal point of view. Maybe you want to give your perspective, or you have follow-up questions on this.
Just one question, and maybe Julia, I know you have a specific question. Just for the operating license, I think you mentioned when we were preparing this meeting that remains on the competence of the national authorities, right? So you still need to be nice with the national authorities because they are the ones still competent. There are no way for the moment that it's granted on another level than on a national level, right, David?
That is very correct, Frederick. And thank you for mentioning that, because I forgot to tell the audience about this. An interesting observation that you have to keep in mind is that EASA is not a country. So they do have a seat in ICAO, but not as a country. So they are not part of several conventions. So for several aspects of the operation, you still depend on your national authority. In the example that I gave, let's say now we would have a customer in Poland, then we would have to register the aircraft in Poland, and everything related to the registry of the aircraft would depend from that national authority. So the single EASA AOC is specifically AOC related. On the operating license, our AOC has an operating license that counts for every aircraft on that AOC, but that is in the principal place of business out of Portugal, and it's the Portuguese Finance Authority that, of course, they delegated that function to ANAC, to the Portuguese authorities, and they issue the operating license for our AOC.
And yeah, if I may, David, while listening to you, I was thinking that I completely agree with you. I think that the provision that you are using for this consolidation of AOC and the EASA AOC was originally drafted for maintenance. And I think the reason why, but I don't know, I'm really speculating here, it is because this basic regulation has been drafted for airlines, commercial airlines, and not for business aviation. And in commercial airlines, it is very rare to have multiple AOCs. Each airline has got one AOC. It is just with Brexit that we have seen groups of airlines having separate AOCs, one in the UK and one in Europe. I'm thinking about EasyJet, one in the UK, one in Austria, or the British Airways group with one in the UK and one in Spain. But it is very rare to have multiple AOCs, as you see in business aviation. So I agree with you. I think that the provision you're using was originally thought for maintenance, not for AOCs.
I think you are spot on with that assumption, Julia. And what I can also share with you is that there was a lot of enthusiasm between us and EASA when we started the pilot program. But I think only 2 weeks afterwards, EASA realized that business aviation AOC is definitely not the simplest organization that they have in their own environment. You can consider a big airline with 2 types of aircraft, with hundreds of aircraft even, but we all know as a business jet operator, you are very lucky if you have a certain type of aircraft, multiple of those, because most likely you will have many of some of the aircraft. No, it's always a diversity, a mix. Also the nature of the operation, it's not scheduled airline routings and stuff like that. So but again, it adds complexity. It added a lot of complexity to the EASA team, but I strongly believe it's a great opportunity for the business community, for business aviation community, to show EASA finally now what business aviation is about. Because again, that is personally my end goal, is a proper understanding by the regulator what business aviation is.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Julia, as well for your question. Just actually have a question from my boss now, Robert Baltus, and I had a meeting with him just before this. He's very enthusiastic about this this webinar as well. Just a more practical one, and connected with standardization. Can you use the templates that you had, let's say, for your national AOCs for the European AOC, and then overall, how long does the project take, let's say, to have the first transfer of one national AOC to a European AOC?
So first of all, when you start and when you have the idea to do this to go to an EASA AOC approval, you need to discuss with the national authority or authorities involved, and they have, and that's written in the basic regulations, they have 180 days to give consent, whether they want to do this, yes or no. They can object based on the fact that I cannot quote it literally. I can look it up for you, but if it would prevent them from doing a safety oversight, or it would damage their own safety system, of course, then they can object. But that would be awkward if that would happen in a way. So they have 180 days to give consent, depending on the relationship with the national authority. That goes faster or slower. And then from there, what EASA will do, they will come and audit your existing AOC with the national authority. I mean, and I'm sharing with you how the process worked for us. They simply observed and they asked the local authority to do a final big audit on the organization. They join as observers, and their thinking is that it is an existing AOC done by an approved authority. So you have an approved management system. So there's no need for them to start changing stuff. Then, of course, as soon as they take over, it's simply a change of approval number. You'll get an EASA AOC number, and then you fall directly under the EASA oversight. As soon as that happens, they start to play around with the new toy. I mean, what I'm saying is they start to schedule audits and come and look at stuff. And that I can guarantee is, of course, the more complicated part of the exercise, because then we will start to see things that maybe they are not so happy with, or that they feel is too much deviating from what the rules want you to do, based on local flavor, of course, and bring it closer to them.
They need the European one to be sort of gold standard AOC. No exemptions, no deviations.
That might sound harsh, but I mean, up till now we had a very good discussion, understanding with the EASA inspectors. I mean, they're really they're also very passionate people about aviation, and that's good to see. But of course, it has to be gold standard.
Yeah. So start to finish, are we looking at 2 years?
For us now, of course, because we were in the initial pilot program, I would say 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
2 to 3. Okay, fine. I think we're getting close to the end. You have to say you've managed very well with all of these questions. So thanks for that. One question about Switzerland. Something working for Swiss registered aircraft?
They have good chocolate in Switzerland. I don't know. Well, honestly, I don't know today.
You have a Swiss AOC, right?
We do have a Swiss AOC, and strategically we choose not to look into Switzerland yet, because I don't know the answer. Okay. Swiss, we all know Switzerland is wonderful, but and a lot of business aviation activity, but it's not part of the European Union. So we are not 100% sure yet, but I must say that we really did not dug in deep and explored that option, because for the time being we're very happy with Switzerland how they are.
Okay. So you need to get through all of the transfers that you're going through first, before you can move on to your next challenge, I guess, which maybe will be Swiss challenge.
No, that is exactly it.
Okay, one final question from Stephen Kelly. Hi, Stephen. Moving a bit away from the European AOC, but a fun question nonetheless. How are you dealing with the UK CAA post-Brexit?
Well, that is going well, but I have a fun story or observation that I can share with you. And that's more related to Brexit and to COVID-19, and to do proper housekeeping as a big organization, because we have an obligation to our shareholders as well. We had 2 fixed wing AOCs in the UK, and out of the 2 fixed wings, we are keeping only 1. But just in one national authority, UK CAA, to deal with the 2 flight inspectors, the way they have been doing the oversight and what they allowed in one AOC, and the other one, which is maybe, I don't know, 30 miles apart, is day and night, and that is quite complicated to deal with.
Yeah, sure. Listen, thanks, David. I mean, it brings us to the conclusion. I assume that if people have questions, they can still email to you. For me, this also says something about just the community of business aviation, because it doesn't sound like you're trying to jealously guard this project for yourself. You actually just want to see the industry develop and see, I guess, some of your competitors develop in a positive way as well.
I absolutely do believe in sharing insight information. I do believe, but I believe more in people signing up to organizations like yours or others and work together. And why am I saying this? Because of the size of our company, and also that's part of my obligations. We are a member of international associations as well. And I do see that the culture on the other side of the ocean, and I'm talking about the United States, is much more cooperative and open. And if someone like you raises a question, there's not 8 or 9 questions raised, but you'll have a lot more. And there's a lot more a culture and a will to share. There's also fierce competition. Competition is good, but we have to work together and fight together to make our regulators understand what we are doing and how we want to do it, while being a safe business.
And there's probably a business side where we can be competitors, and an operational side where we can be friends. We definitely need the support of each other. So I think that, you know, if you have more questions about this, you can use my contact details, and we'll pass them on to Dave and try and get a good response. Thanks. This was in the beginning. This was a suggestion from Julia. So thank you very much for initiating this whole discussion. Thanks for all of the questions. Let's move on then to data and how COVID-19 is impacting all of us. So very happy that we have Arthur Thomas. Sometimes it seems like his main activity is not providing data, but actually painting business aviation magnificent, creating magnificent paintings of business aircraft and fighter aircraft. I think he produces about 100 or more than 100 a year. But he's also putting a huge amount of time in just monitoring how this whole crisis is impacting the sector, and he's prepared something for all of you now. So I think we can go over to Arthur for his presentation. Still always room for comments and questions, so keep them coming. Thanks very much. Over to you, Arthur.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the nice introduction. I don't paint 100 painting a year, but I produce a lot. Let's face it.
So what are you're counting? What did you do last year?
I did in 2020. I did 24 paintings.
Okay, still good going.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, my job is to deal with data and to have a look at the overarching trends in Europe, and to provide the members, but the industry and my colleagues, when it comes to advocacy for business aviation. My work is to provide data. So obviously 2020 has been one of the most particular year ever for let's say aviation as a whole. So just a small disclaimer on my side. There are as many stories and as many ways to describe this data as there are operators, as there are countries, as there are airports. And so when it's about trends, it's a little bit complex, because basically you have huge differences depending on the analysis scope. So that's what I will show you here is really about, you know, the overarching picture in Europe, but there are huge differences between different places and different airplanes and different operators. So I guess that there will be, you might have your own interpretation of those data as well. I won't be explaining what happened and what would happen in the future. I will just describe what happened. And so just for you to know, obviously do not hesitate to raise any question, and do not hesitate to comment as well in the chat area. And obviously do not hesitate to reach out to me as well. Would you want any further information on those data? So let's move on. This is an overview of 2020. So 2020 being here the red curve on the screen. And so if we compare with the 2 previous years, we really see this drop. First wave, second wave, a little bit of recovery throughout the summer. So yeah, business aviation has been losing a lot of activity in 2020. But this month view here is not as precise as it should be. The next slide is slightly more relevant, because if there is something we know about COVID, is that this story happened on a daily basis. Every single day we had the news, and every single day new restrictions were coming, and so here a weekly view makes more sense to describe the way COVID has impacted the industry. And so we really see that from the second week of March onwards, this is where things happened. And business aviation throughout Europe. So Europe here is about geographical Europe. So business aviation has fallen down to -76% around April, compared with the same April month in 2019. And we have seen business aviation slightly but slowly, but recovering anyway, up to the summer, where, let's face it, business aviation has been pretty performing, and was back to what we could call normal levels. And then from September onwards, we had this second wave coming, and we see that business aviation has been impacted again, but slightly less. So this is what I can tell you here about this 2020 year in Europe, week per week. Voilà. So if we cumulate the flights between 2019 and 2020, at the end of 2020, business aviation has flown -25% compared with 1 year ago. So this is where we are, and we had in 2019 around 700,000 flights happening in Europe in business aviation, and this is about a little bit less than 200,000 less flights in 2020. Let's have a look, a short look a quick look at the main, I would call it the main market here. So I don't exactly know what does this chart show, but we obviously see that countries were impacted sort of following the same path, but with some differences. The yellow curve here, Italy, shows that, as we have experienced, Italy was hit first, and so then followed by the other countries. We see some differences in the countries. For instance, we see a country like Germany that was slightly less impacted, -64 at the worst in Germany, when the average in Europe was -76%. So this is what highlights the differences that happened during the I would say the story of the COVID and its impact on business aviation. Since 2020 has been less about the world, but more about countries, things were happening at the country level. We see those differences here. We still see some countries such as Switzerland, Spain, or Germany that were pretty positive during August, up to plus 10% for some of them during the summer. So that's the full overview of Europe. You might be very surprised to see some green color here, but this is what the data tells us. And we see obviously a trend of minus 30%, -20, -30% in pretty much all the countries, but Albania, Latvia, and Lithuania. Let's face it, the size of those markets have to be taken into account, as you see in the square-centric central chart here. If we look at the top 5 markets, France, Germany, UK, Italy, and Switzerland, accounting for half of the traffic in Europe. We are having this kind of minus 25% trend, and so you see the big differences in the way business aviation reacted to COVID in those countries. If we have a closer look at the main airports here, so those are the main airports for 2020 and the one with the biggest amount of traffic. Once again, different stories. We see green color here. What is to be seen, especially here, is that big hubs for business aviation, if I may say so. So the biggest airports such as Paris Le Bourget, Geneva, or Nice or London Luton, for instance, those airports that are usually about long haul traffic, those were more impacted than the other. I will come to that point in a later slide. So that's really something you would want to remember, that business aviation, the long haul component of business aviation was strongly hit by COVID. And that's kind of obvious. Another way of looking at this year, these are the top airport pairs. And so we see here, and that's really where it's interesting here. You see a lot of green here. So I think almost half of those city pairs are positive compared with 1 year ago. So I won't explain the story of those individual city pairs. I don't know them, and some of you here might know them, but this is what we observe. And we see that the first European city pair, which is always the same, Geneva, Paris, Le Bourget, this has been hit by minus 30% in 2020, while other city pairs were slightly less impacted, and some of them were really having a positive trend in 2020. So that's really interesting, and that tells a lot about the kind of flexibility of our industry, and we see that year on year things are slightly different. So with the COVID striking Europe, this is what we can observe here. So let's have a look at this year from a mission perspective. So here in EBAA, we always like to do kind of simple things, given the different audiences we talk to. So I've just we split the industry into 4 big forms of business aviation: the commercial component, the charter and air taxi; the non-commercial, which might be purely private business aviation or corporate business aviation. And there are 2 additional layers that are medical, special business aviation, and the diplomatic component, which are state flights. Those so just in case you wonder, those segments are defined whether depending on the flight plans as they are fulfilled by the operators. And so what we see here is that commercial and non-commercial business aviation were the most impacted. Those are anyway the biggest component of business aviation. And we really see that state and diplomatic, but more especially medical and special business aviation, those were slightly less impacted by this crisis. I would imagine that there are good reasons for that. I don't know them, so I won't comment on this. But we really see that, for instance, medical business aviation has been very, although slightly impacted, yet has been flying in 2020. I think that around April, the medical business aviation was about 1 business aviation flight out of 4. So that was really a big moment, and this is where those medical business jets were flying the most. the exact same data, but another angle of analysis. That's the fleet component. So here again in EBAA, we do simple segmentation. So you have the turboprops, and you have the light, the medium, the heavy jets, and then the bizliner. So that's 5 categories. And what is to be seen here, and I think the chart speaks by itself, the bigger the airplane, the worse the impact was. Basically, that's as simple as that. And you see that those yellow and dark blue curve really highlight this trend. Heavy jets were really deeply impacted by the COVID, and they were kind of grounded for the year, while smaller jets and turboprops were pretty active, so less impacted, recovering faster, flying more, and eventually having good performances during the summer. So this really highlights the fact that the business aviation in all its complexity shows this kind of trends. And whenever we say that business aviation was, you know, slightly less impacted than the airlines, yes, but let's look at the details, and we see that for, I would say, all the operators that are operating big jets, that was not that, you know, that nice, I would say. So this is what is to be seen here. Just to complete the previous slide, let's have a look at the flight length of those flights in Europe. And as you saw before in the airport pairs and the airport component, the airport slide, when I told you that the big airports were deeply impacted, this is what we can see here. All the flights above 5 hours. Can you see the curve? How, you know, how strong it is in terms of impact? And so, yeah, obviously no transatlantic flights or less transatlantic flights. And so we really see that business aviation has been more than ever in 2020 about Europe, short flights, and I would even say domestic flights for the big countries, since the borders were closed, basically. So if we look at the world and the way the world was connected with Europe, yeah. So everywhere it's deeply impacted, but for some weird reason I won't be able to explain. Eastern and southern parts of Caribbean were still having a better year than 2019, but for the rest of the world, we really see that it's been deeply impacted. And one of the biggest connections being transatlantic. So with North America, we see a minus 50% for United States and Canada. So really, all this component of business aviation has been really deeply impacted in 2020, and it's not over yet. A last slide from me. This is the comparison between business aviation and airlines in Europe. And so you see business aviation being the purple curve here versus the dark blue, which is the airlines, namely legacy carriers, low cost, and charter all together. And I guess it does not come as a surprise, but if we compare the two components, we really see that airlines were really deeply impacted and have definitely not recovered yet. While business aviation is slightly more kind of flexible. So it's interesting to see these trends, and that's pretty much it. There are hundreds of possibilities to describe those data. There are thousands of other data to analyze. I would simply invite you to reach out to me if you have any question and if you need any specific data. And just before I answer questions, if there are, just a very small thing I would want to show you. Plenty of you are aware of this, but there is There is in EBAA website data services for the members that you can use, that you are more than welcome to use. And there is, for instance, the EBAA yearbook, which shows infographics about all the European countries, the top 50 European airports, the top 50 active European airplanes. And this is about hundreds of data about 2020. This is being updated as we speak. And so I would invite you to have a look at this EBAA yearbook. Voila.
Thanks very much, Arthur. So I see just a couple of, we might just run a little bit over time, but just a couple of questions in the chat. And thanks very much for this very comprehensive presentation. Do you have data on empty legs versus flights with passengers?
I do, yes, but I don't have here to show, but yes, I do.
Okay, and there was just one Simon spotted, I think just between two airports, ESND and Stockholm. I think it was up 523%. I don't know if that jumped out at you, if there was some explanation for that.
I don't. No, I don't. That's very interesting, and I would be very keen into knowing, okay. Or into having those explanations.
Yeah. And Razvan Stefan, it's interesting that traffic to Maldives and Dubai in the last month of 2020 in January seems to be higher than 2019. So basically good winter destinations still, and less restrictions there, I guess, is perhaps an explanation for that.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, I think we can close the meeting. Thanks very much for all of your participation. And we will be able to send the slides following the meeting. Thanks to all the panelists. Thanks to the AMAC chairs. A couple of things just to mention. We have more of this type of thing coming up. So Air Ops, which you all probably know, is moving online this year. That's starting on the 16th of February. Every Tuesday we'll have a webinar there. I'll put the link in the chat, so it'd be great to see you online for those as well. As Arthur mentions, check out our website for the latest update on all of our data. We also have we're also collecting information on Brexit and how people are responding to that. So Robert has a link in the chat there about the latest guidelines that we've gathered to members and then are presenting to all of our members. And I think some last words to Julia and Frederic.
Not much to add from my side. It's been a very interesting presentation. I have to thank David for having accepted to share his insight with us. I thought it was very interesting, and Arthur as well. Very interesting presentation. I think we should all move to Lithuania, Latvia, and all those countries where actually business aviation went up. God knows why. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.